What is up, mi gente? My name is XOJO. If this is your first time on this channel, welcome. For those of you who are returning, I'm so excited to dive into the romance challenge. This is just a challenge I made for myself where I said I would try romance for the very first time because I have never until this point really read a true romance novel where the whole plot is just the romance. And so I read a total of 9 books. I want to break them down, give you my rating, give you my thoughts, and then let you know, do I really like romance or is it just not my jam? Let's get into it. Today's drink is served in this really cute cup that I got for that Valentine's Day feel since it's love month. It says powered by iced coffee and love. So cute. I've had this in my fridge for a while unopened, so we're just gonna have it today. And this super cute straw. Before we get started, if you're not yet subscribed, please subscribe. So many of you keep coming back and watching, but the majority of you are not yet subscribed. I'm gonna go through these books in no particular order. I'm just gonna go into them, let you know what I think, because I want this channel to have a variety of genres and I want to expand my taste and try different things because I think that's important. I decided to create this romance challenge for myself where all month long I'm just reading romance. That's the majority of the books I read. That's the genre I was really hitting this month. Because February is love month, I decided to do it in February. I asked for suggestions and I did my best to get as many books as possible. I really decided to check out from the library because it's a new genre. So if your suggestion isn't on here, it's not because I didn't want to read it. I put the hold at the library in January for February and a lot of them were just not yet available, and we'll get more into that later. So the very first book I ended up reading that I actually mentioned in my Get Ready With Me Books and Blush video in January is The Kiss Quotient. I had no idea what I was getting into when I started The Kiss Quotient. It's actually focused on a character named Stella who works in economics and she has Asperger's and her family really pressures her to have a relationship. What made it really sad is that Stella didn't really want a relationship, but she wants to please her parents and she outright says so in the book. I want to please my mom, I want to please my dad and find a relationship, but I don't know how to get a boyfriend. This slime ball tells her that men will only want women who know what they like in bed and who are good in bed. It's just really awful, disgusting advice. And Stella really takes this to heart, right? Because she thinks, okay, I really don't know. And this man is telling me that this is what men like. So I have to figure out how to get good in bed. So she ends up hiring an escort named Michael to show her how to be good in bed. This is where I was like, whoa, I had no idea I was getting into basically smut land. If you're a romance reader, that quickly went away with this entire challenge. Michael ends up being a pretty perfect guy where he's just so handsome. He's very thoughtful. When he has a night with Stella, he realizes that she wasn't treated the way she should have been treated in her experiences because she has been with guys intimately, but they haven't been the best experiences for her. This book does not have any trigger warnings of SA or anything like that, and it doesn't really seem like it's that way either. It just seems that Stella didn't know that this should be pleasing for her as well. There's a lot of consent in this book, which I really like, from both Stella and Michael. So Stella checks in with Michael often as their relationship develops, and that's something that Michael really liked in her because most people just treat him like an escort, like an object, so it's like whatever, they don't really think about him. Michael has a really big rule where he will not meet with a client more than once because it's just gotten messy and he wants to keep things professional. But with Stella, he just immediately falls in love with her. She has this librarian look that really turns him on. I was like, okay, buddy, didn't really need to know that, but she's just so brilliant and considerate and he ends up falling for her pretty quick. And really that was one of the things I actually didn't like in this book, is that Stella's trying to find a guy and right away runs into the perfect man. I didn't really get attached to any character, to Michael or Stella. I will say it's a really sweet book, but I didn't like the way it was paced and I thought it was too perfect in a kind of annoying way. There are situations where it's like, oh, they're meant to be and you ship it, but I just didn't really care much for Stella and Michael. I wasn't really thinking about this book when I wasn't reading this book. I was just like, okay, I have to push through it because it's the first book. And I started getting pretty nervous, like, oh my gosh, maybe I don't like romance because I'm not really interested or invested in this relationship. I don't really care. I think their miscommunication is a little annoying. There are definitely cute things like Michael's family, and he really cares for them. Stella's really sweet on her own in the way she treats Michael. They obviously end up falling in love, which is pretty funny because it does have a fake relationship trope where instead of learning how to be intimate in bed, Stella wants to learn how to be a girlfriend, and so they end up fake dating, and within 3 days they fall in love. So this is what I mean, like, it's kind of insta love, not really insta love. It's just really funny because the book makes it sound like they've been in a fake relationship for 6 months or 3 months, and then Stella says it's been a great 3 days, and I just had it at that point. I just thought it was so hilarious. I was like, okay, this is like dreamland. By the end of the book, they're like 2 months into dating and they're engaged, and that's pretty much how it ends. Picture perfect. Michael has the business he always wanted to open as a fashion designer. Stella supports him with her econ background, and she also has promotions at work. They're engaged, happily ever after. Done. And so I ended up giving it 2 stars because I wasn't invested in this relationship. I thought it was a little bit silly how fast it went. There were sections where it was really sweet and the characters were definitely different. So there are 2 books in this list that I DNF'd, and one of them is It Happened One Summer. I really tried with this book. It starts socialite Piper, where she goes to parties, has like the best boyfriend, whatever, and the book literally opens with this boyfriend breaking up with her, and she's worried about the cameras catching her and how is she gonna react, and her reputation being dragged because she only has her status, and if this boyfriend is mistreating her or if the paparazzi end up publishing something that completely tarnishes her name, her reputation is over and she can't keep, you know, living the life that she wants to live as a socialite. Right off the bat, I found Piper pretty freaking annoying. I could not read her narration. I could not handle this MC. I just thought this was a really annoying way of speaking. I did not like her at all, and so I decided, you know what? There are so many suggestions I have on this list. I'm gonna have to DNF this because I can't stand Piper, and it's just the first chapter. So I pushed a little bit further on, still could not handle her. I know the story is about her finding this like cute country guy later on because I read the premise after I started the book and realized I'm DNFing this. Still didn't interest me enough to continue, so I'm so sorry if you loved It Happened One Summer, but it was not my cup of tea, and I definitely realized that there are certain characters I don't like because the second book I DNF'd is actually Book Lovers. Now, don't come at me. This book was so popular in 2021 or 2022. Whenever it came out, it was so popular. I was so excited to read it. I started it and I quickly quit it. When we look at those Hallmark movies where that city guy goes to a country town or his hometown and he falls in love with the, you know, girl next door and ends up staying there and realizes like his career isn't everything, or the other way around, the girl goes back to her hometown and realizes her career isn't everything, and it's like this wholesome cookie cutter happy ending. We never get to really see the partner they leave behind because they end up breaking up with the evil girlfriend or the, you know, bitchy girlfriend or whatever. They end up leaving them behind for their small town girl or small town boy. And so Book Lovers actually focuses on the ex-girlfriend left behind, and this has happened to her many times. So I thought it would actually be pretty interesting once I started reading this book and saw her break down these tropes and say like, I'm actually the girlfriend that gets left behind. But she was so annoying, and I get that's her character, that she is annoying and she finds her own love, but I could not stay with it. And so this is what I mean, like I found out through this challenge that I just can't stand that type of character, just like with Piper and with this character in Book Lovers that I don't even remember her name. I could not stand this, so I ended up DNFing it. someone later on did tell me that her development and her arc is really incredible, and that's why they liked it. So I think I might try this one again. I haven't heard the same thing for It Happened One Summer. I heard mixed reviews about it, that, you know, she doesn't really develop as much, or her character doesn't change in a very interesting or engaging way. Let me know if you've read it, if that's different. But I think I might give Book Lovers another shot, but at another time. The next one I have on here was actually my favorite of all of my reads. It was so cute, it was so funny. I absolutely loved the MC, and that's something I didn't expect, and it's Get a Life, Chloe Brown. It is so freaking cute, you guys. I definitely recommend you read it. It is so adorable. Chloe Brown is a woman that comes from a really great background. Like, economically, her parents do really well. She has other sisters that love her very much, but she does struggle with fibromyalgia. And for those of you who don't know what fibromyalgia is, it's a widespread like muscle pain and tenderness. It hurts so freaking bad that you really can't move at all. You can't really move your arms or anything wherever that pain is. It can go from the neck all the way down to your legs. It's really painful. It makes it really hard for people to work long hours often, or even at their laptop, because again, that pain will spread over the arms or shoulders, and it's just really, really painful, so tender. There's really nothing else you can do for it. When you have flare-ups, people have medication. So Chloe Brown actually struggles with fibromyalgia, and one day when she's on her walks, there's a car that nearly runs into her, and right as she's having this near-death experience, she has her life flash before her eyes and realizes she has never lived. She hasn't done anything because she's been struggling with fibromyalgia, kept away, sheltered, because she gets really bad flare-ups. Her family really takes care of her, which is loving, but she's never done anything on her own. And so she ends up making this list of things she wants to do so that her tombstone can say Chloe Brown really lived her life. She has things like live on her own, but she also has things like have a really, really good hookup and just a one-night stand, like ride a motorcycle for the first time, go camping because she's never been camping. So these are things that are really meaningful to her. In the following chapter, you see that she is living on her own, and she immediately has this really bad tension with her superintendent, Red. So Chloe is such a cute, posh, English accent girl that comes from a really great background with loving sisters. She's living on her own. She works from home. And Red gets a really bad first impression of her. Red is such a people pleaser. He really can't say no. He's an artist, but he looks quote unquote like he is a criminal. According to the book, that was really hard for me to picture, because Red is this flannel wearing, tattoo wearing, long hair guy who has his motorcycle, but he is really sweet, and he is, like I said, a people pleaser. He's just a really thoughtful person. It was really hard for me to get into that stereotype, you know, mindset that when you see a really tatted guy, he's automatically a criminal looking guy. I did spend so much of my young adult life with people that absolutely love tattoos. I lived in a city that tattoo culture was a thing, and there were some of the best, most loving people I've met. So don't connect tattoos with being a bad person. That's not something I do. I think our generation doesn't do that. It was really hard to picture Red as this really hard looking guy when he's actually really sweet, because in my head I'd be like, well, of course he's like that. I don't know, what do the tattoos have to do with it? So it was really hard for me to have that image, because Red thinks Chloe looks at him like that. Red thinks that Chloe's treating him like a criminal, when really Chloe's just really flustered around him because he's so handsome, and she knows he's an artist, and she kind of peeks at him through the window because she can see through his window across from her apartment. It's an enemies to lovers trope for sure. Red also had a really bad experience with a girl from England as well, named, I think she was called Piper. So here we go with the Piper names. He had a really bad experience with her where she was really abusive, and you find out just how abusive she is throughout the book. Nothing heavy. We don't go into details, so you don't have to worry about trigger warnings in that sense, but she was verbally abusive to him. She always talked down on him, and she actually did end up hitting him sometimes, and he said, I mean, it didn't hurt, but Chloe was very quick to show him it's still not okay. She was still hitting you. Just because it doesn't hurt doesn't mean it's not abuse. If she was was okay just slapping you around whenever she was mad. So they do have some miscommunication now and then, because Red doesn't know if maybe Chloe is only using him as either as an object or amusement and distraction, and Chloe is also unsure if Red is ready to commit or if he thinks she's like too much and overwhelming. But it wasn't annoying, and that's how I know I really like this book too. The way they miscommunicated felt pretty freaking realistic of how couples miscommunicate and how they have to set aside their stubbornness and sort of compromise and come to a place of vulnerability to really understand what happened and why their relationship took that type of hit. Really funny. I was laughing the whole time. I wanted to keep knowing what was happening. It does get a little spicy in there, and I'm still not used to the spiciness in these books. That's something that I don't know if I'm still used to. I don't think so if I'm talking about it like this and get a little bit shy about it, but there is some spiciness in there, not as much as other books I'm going to talk about, but overall really funny, really cute. I freaking love Chloe Brown. And then to my surprise, I found out that her sisters also have their own books. So this is the Brown Sisters series, and Chloe Brown is the first, and so I'm actually really excited to keep reading the rest of the series. So I'm rating Get a Life Chloe Brown 4 stars. The next one I really liked as well, not as much as Get a Life Chloe Brown, and it's called Red, White, and Royal Blue. You guys, this is a book that really tested my, how do I say it? Because it's not like it's a default bias. It's something I automatically thought would happen based on my experiences. And sorry if I'm getting a little sciencey with you. I was a psych major and did a lot of research in my undergrad. Basically, when you're going through life, you can't think of every single thing you're doing, or that would take up too much space in your brain. So you develop all of these default settings. Like if you go to the grocery store, instead of your brain having to process every single cereal box, it goes back to experiences you've had, and so it can narrow and like tunnel vision you into your Lucky Charms, and so you don't have to think about it too hard. You know what you like, and so you can pick it up and go. So for me, I say this because I have some defaults, right? I grew up watching some Hallmark or cheesy movies now and then, twins secretly switching, like Cinderella Story, all of these things. I've heard about Red, White, and Royal Blue, but I've never looked at the premise. I never really heard who the characters are. I've seen the cover. Mine is a collector's edition that I found at a used bookstore, so lucky me. But when I've seen the original cover, it has two guys in the front. It has a prince looking guy and kind of a normal looking guy, and so I legit thought this was going to be a story about a girl having to pick in between some guy having to do with the White House and a prince. Like I automatically thought there was going to be this girl torn between two guys, kind of how I've seen in the past. I didn't realize it's actually an LGBTQ story, and so right away I was like, wait, where's the other character? These are two guy names. I'm really confused, and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm so dumb. It was just the funniest, most like a sweet story. It's crazy how much the author fit into this book, like how much representation and how much conflict there, because this book focuses on the first female president's son, who is also biracial, and realizes later on in the book that he is also bisexual. So he's not just interested in women, he realizes that he also likes guys. And the prince is one of the princes of England, right? So the royal family, and he's secretly gay. And so there's just so much packed in there, because obviously even in today's world, we know the royal family would not be accepting of that. And also the fact that, you know, we haven't had a female president in the US yet. We have a VP now. And so there's just so much in here. And Alex, who is the first president's son, isn't just the first female president's son, but he's also half Mexican, half white. And so there's just so much conflict there, because people aren't fully accepting of his Latin background, and he looks Latin. He's not just passing as white or anything like that. And he's also biracial, which a lot of people who are biracial also run into so much conflict of like, you're not Mexican enough, but you're not white, you can't pass as white, but you're also, again, not fully immersed in our culture. It's just a really awful conflict, and this book just goes through it all. So this is also an enemies to lovers trope. Henry and Alex don't like each other. They've always had conflict, and they really can't show that in public because he's the prince of a country and he's the son of the president. And so if they have some conflict, it could be seen as the country's bringing conflict. It could blow up into something really big. Alex has some sort of pressure to make sure he looks good in front of the camera until an incident happens where it almost looks like he knocked Henry over and the cake at this royal wedding fell over. And so it's just a whole thing where now Alex has to go spend time with Henry to clear up their name and really show that they're buddy-buddy. He hates it. He doesn't want to spend time with him. He thinks Henry's the most boring person alive because all these articles talk about the most generic guy ever, like a typical royal would be. And he soon finds out that they have so much in common and they have really big chemistry. They end up hooking up, and so that's where the romance begins. Now this story is really funny, and I think I was also entertained because it wasn't just focused on their romance. There are other characters involved. It focuses a lot on like beautiful friendship. There is a political scandal that happens in this book, and it's not just, you know, Henry and Alex, because they keep this under the table, so it's very secretive. Alex has a really great sister named June, who is also so bright and so loving with Alex. His parents are divorced, so his dad is Mexican and a senator, I believe. He's definitely in politics, and his mom is the one who won and became the president and comes from Texas. They have to get reelected, and they're running against a pretty strong Republican candidate. There are a lot of betrayals here, politics wise. There's a lot of tension between Henry and Alex's personal life versus, you know, their relationship, because obviously the Prince of England can't just go off and be with whoever he wants to be, and Alex isn't sure what he's going to do because his mom makes it clear, if you choose Henry and you go this route, you know, you might have to give up a lot of your political dreams, because not everyone's accepting of this, especially when the person you're picking is the literal Prince of England. And in the beginning, they're really just hooking up, which this book is so freaking smutty, like insane, because they start off as a hookup. They're just enjoying these like passionate times together whenever they can, and they do a lot of dirty emailing back and forth, which was really funny at times, and I was just dying at the way Alex would sign off his emails, because Alex is definitely more bold and ballsy, and Henry's a little bit more reserved, but he's also very witty. Of course, it can't just stay as a hookup. It becomes a relationship. Alex opens up that he actually loves Henry after, you know, months of them being together and having fun making memories. Henry does ghost him because he doesn't know what that would mean for his family and what would happen, because his family, they made it very, very clear that he can't live his life truthfully, that he's gonna have to pretend and go on these dates with all these other women to make sure no one ever finds out. So Henry's really afraid of this because he has feelings for Alex. And so of course this is how the story goes. So I definitely recommend the book. I think it was really fun. I think it was really sweet. It was so cool seeing this world where we have characters that don't fit the status quo in leadership roles, not just in everyday roles. Again, I don't think smuttiness is my thing. There's another book in here that is also pretty smutty, and so I realized like I just don't think that's my jam overall. And so I'm gonna give this 4 stars as well, rating it as my second favorite romance book of the month. The next one is called The Bodyguard. This is the second book that made me rethink my defaults, because you can see on the cover there's a guy in a suit and there's a woman. Again, I thought the guy would be the bodyguard, but it turned out she was the bodyguard. And so Hannah works for this bodyguard company, pretty high end, and they have to take care of this movie star who's been getting a lot of like stalker emails and messages, and visits, and so they have to protect him while he's in this small town in Texas for whatever reason. He's a really, really famous actor. Hannah just lost her mom, who she didn't really have a good relationship with because she struggled with alcoholism and then passed away, so she wasn't really there for Hannah, but she still obviously loved her mom. So she just lost her, but she's a really big workaholic, so she doesn't want to surrender work. She was dating someone else in her firm who she's really proud to call her boyfriend, but he ends up dumping her, and he's such a big jerk throughout the whole book. He's just, ugh. She's the lead of the detail that's going to protect Jack. And again, this book is again super picture perfect, like everything just fits really well. It started off really strong in my opinion. I actually liked the beginning a lot. Jack is actually this country boy, this stable boy. He loves horses. He really loves his family. He comes from a really close-knit family. He lost his brother recently in an accident, and the rumor is that Jack was driving drunk and that's what killed his brother. And so now his oldest brother is not talking to Jack, and it's very clear to Jack that he blames him for his death. His mom has a illness, and so he tries to visit her, but again, his brother keeps him away. There's just a lot of tension there. There's no insta love. I mean, Hannah realizes he's like really handsome movie star and everything. He's actually really nice, but it's not like he's completely, you know, infatuated with her, and she's not infatuated with him. It builds up over time as they're spending time together. Hannah's ex-boyfriend's such a jerk, reminding her that she's nothing special compared to the movie stars he's surrounded by, so why would he be interested in her? So my main issue with this book was just emphasizing how ugly and haggard and homely Hannah is, and how could Jack possibly want her or like her. Just that emphasis made it really weird, because just because Hannah doesn't wear makeup or like doesn't dress super feminine or whatever it is means that she's just not as attractive. And I just don't think that's necessarily true. If she just thought that herself, okay, I understand it's a self-esteem thing, but people around her would also actually call out Hannah. Like, she didn't really think about the way she was dressing until other people around her said she can't possibly be seen with Jack and like fit in because she's so homely looking. She's doesn't take care of herself. She doesn't wear any makeup. And so I just don't think that was necessary. That just seemed so weird to keep adding and emphasizing. And then we get to this really awkward scene toward the end. Like, it just kind of got worse over time. Toward the end of the book, one of the celebrities that Jack is supposedly dating, and it's really just a Hollywood relationship, still doesn't understand why he would rather pick her, because by now they shared their feelings a little bit more. So she goes into this super weird speech in front of Jack and his family and Hannah's friends, saying like, why would anyone actually believe you would leave me for her? I mean, look at her. She's not even beautiful. She doesn't compare to me. And then it gets worse, and she turns around to this giant group and she asks them, raise your hand if you would pick Hannah over me. Come on, raise your hand. Anybody, raise your hand. And so you get this really awkward but supposed to be heartfelt, where Jack first raises his hand and then everyone slowly raises their hand after 10 beats. They end up raising their hand, and Hannah just feels so uncomfortable and awkward. I was like, is this supposed to like make me like Jack? That Jack stood up for her and said, I would take ugly Hannah over you. I'm a great person. I don't know, that just felt super weird and like not a compliment at all, and just really insulting to Hannah as a character, especially when her family and friends slowly ended up raising their hands. It just felt like so out of place from this pretty great buildup and just natural and organic relationship that was building between Jack and Hannah. So that was just so unnecessary. And then the very end, we get all these different plot twists of who's the actual stalker, and Hannah runs into the actual psycho who's the stalker's ex-husband, and he's all wackadoodle. That interaction is more comedic, and everything fits perfectly despite this guy having a gun, and the dialogue is just so bad. It was just a really bad, weird ending, and I was like, man, this sucks, because it started off well and then it started losing my interest. I didn't understand why we had to obsess over Hannah's ugliness, and then again this psycho thing, and then the very, very end, the epilogue, everything is perfect. Like, everything just works out so freaking perfectly. It felt too silly. And I get it's supposed to be a bit more rom-com and have some funniness to it, but that psycho stalker part just didn't seem funny. It just seemed ridiculous to me. And so I was torn. I think in the end, I'm gonna give it 2.5 stars. I didn't really love how they represented Hannah in this book, and then how things just too ridiculous by the end of the book. Imagine someone has a crush on you and really just really likes you. You're like their first love, really sweet, right? Supposed to be all lovey-dovey and wonderful. And then they come at you and they say this: I want to kill you myself. And if I can't kill you, I'd rather cripple you. So then I know exactly where you are at all times and you can never leave me, and I become your superior and your master. Romantic, right? According to all the stands of this book I'm going to talk about next, that's love. And this book is Call Me By Your Name. And no, this isn't even the worst line I've read in this book. It's pretty freaking horrifying, and I'm gonna get real on this book, all right? Call Me By Your Name focuses on Oliver and Elio. I don't know if you say Elio or Leo. Elio, I'm just gonna go Elio. Elio is this 17-year-old boy that lives in Italy with parents that are professors and whatever, and they host people that come through their house at the coast of southern Italy. They spend time there working on their manuscripts or whatever else they're doing. They just love to host young people, and this time Oliver from the US comes to stay with them. Oliver, who is 24, and Elio becomes absolutely obsessed with him. And so the point of this book is like supposed to show first love and like first infatuation, but to me it sounded like Joe from You talking, and as if we're in the mind of a serial killer who has found its next prey. It started off already sounding really creepy, more intellectual and logical than anything else, pretty pretentious. I did not like the tone of the book, but I said, okay, maybe it gets really deep and it gets really meaningful, maybe more philosophical, and just really explore what a first love is. I got to lines where Elio thought it would be exciting if Oliver's boat trip went wrong and his body washed up to shore bloated and puffy and dead. He did say that line with the wheelchair wanting to cripple him because he can be Oliver's master and Oliver has to depend on him. Some other lines in here, and like a little bit of a trigger warning here of thinking of self-infliction and all that stuff. Elio says, then it hit me, I could have killed myself instead, or hurt myself bad enough and let him know why'd I done it. If I hurt my face, I want him to look at me and wonder why. Why might anyone do this to themselves? Until years and years later, yes, later, he'd finally piece the puzzle together and beat his head against the wall. There's this scene where he is so obsessed with Oliver's bathing suit, like a specific bathing suit that he hasn't worn in a while. He goes in his room, finds it, puts it on, rubs himself against it, finishes in it, and leaves it there for Oliver to find because he's just tired of hiding his feelings. This was like, no. This was just no. I was like, is this romance? Maybe I got this wrong. Maybe it's a psycho thriller or psychological book or something. So I looked it up, and no, you guys, it is literally categorized under romance and under drama. So I would believe the drama more than the romance. And I have heard the movie is drastically different, that the tone is softer, the love is sweeter, even if the age gap is still really creepy and kind of weird. So as I was going through this, I said, no, like I do not think this is romance, or this is sweet, or this should be supported, or this should be encouraged. There's also the question of their age gap that I know a lot of people talk about, and there's like conflict there. To me, it does feel a little creepy and predatory, especially when later on Oliver does acknowledge that he's much older than Elio and he doesn't feel like it's right, but still goes through with it anyway. But there's also this line that Elio said that was just so uncomfortable, and I wonder like why, if this is very clear to the characters and the author, why would we still have and root for this relationship? And he said sometimes it was Kiara who had to be eliminated. Kiara was this girl that would spend so much time with Oliver that he was really jealous of. I knew what she was up to. At my age, her body was more than ready for him. More than mine, I wondered. Again, talking about their developing bodies and how Ellie was like, I don't think I'm developed enough for Oliver. It was just really weird. I did not like that this was supposed to be romance. If it was labeled as a psycho thriller or something like that, where you are inside Joe from Yu's mind and you're reading this obsessed serial killer guy and how he thinks about his relationship with other people, it did a fantastic job at that, and I would be like, yep, 4 or 5 stars. This guy is nuts and this relationship is so unhealthy and so bad. Definitely did its job, but it's supposed to be romance, and that's what I don't understand. And when I looked at other reviews and people that also left a similar review, because this book is very highly rated, people were defending this book like, don't you know what it's like to fall in love for the first time? Don't you know what it's like to have your first crush? Am I creepy for having these thoughts? And the answer is yes, you are freaking nuts if these were your thoughts when you had your first love. If my partner or a crush I had was suddenly thinking like, I wish I could cripple you so that I would know exactly where you are at all times and you would depend on me, I would freaking run. Like, get the hell out of there. This is not romantic. This is not sweet. If you're thinking this is what love is and this is what you want and you want an Elio for yourself, you need some therapy. You need something. I don't understand. And some people said it's supposed to be more philosophical and kind of Murakami-ish, but I would have to disagree. I don't know what is philosophical about grabbing a peach and Elio finishing inside this peach and Oliver then consuming this peach. If I have to suffer, you have to suffer. And so if I could give this book -5 stars, I would give it -5 stars, but because the rating only goes as far as 1, I'm gonna give it 1. It is not doing what it's supposed to be doing. This is not romantic. This is so highly toxic. This next book is called Spoiler Alert. And this book is also a little bit weird for different reasons. Of course, nothing's gonna be the worstness of Call Me By Your Name, but Spoiler Alert is actually modeled after Game of Thrones and like some actual real actors from Game of Thrones, because so many people were pissed at the arc of some characters in Game of Thrones and how it strayed away from the books. I do not watch Game of Thrones and I don't read it, but even I could tell like this sounds very Game of Thrones-ish just from what I've seen in pop culture. This stars 2 characters, Marcus and April. April loves to write fan fiction and she absolutely loves Game of Thrones knockoff version that I don't even remember what it's called. And then Marcus is an actor in the show that absolutely hates his character development and he disagrees with the writers, and he secretly writes fan fiction to kind of make up for the show isn't showing. So already it's kind of weird that you have this actor that is writing fan fiction about his like coworkers and himself. That's okay, a little weird. And April doesn't realize that this is the actual Marcus from the show. She just knows that there's this like buddy there that she likes to write fan fiction with. He ends up going offline when they actually meet in person for a date, and Marcus knows that's who she actually is, that this is the person he's been talking to for 2 years and really likes, but he can't confess that he's that secret anon person online because he could lose his job, because he's been very clear online that he doesn't agree with the directors, and if anyone finds out that's him, like the actor, he would get in so much trouble, fired, probably sued for going against the directors. The directors are already under a lot of heat from fans for ruining the show basically, which is actually what happened with Game of Thrones. People were so pissed at the directors for ruining and the way the ending came to be and everything. Dogs are barking, so. Honestly, I didn't really care much for this. At first, I thought it was going to be really cute. I liked April a lot. Over the course of the book, as they're in this relationship, Marcus ends up really being the perfect guy. He always knows what she's thinking. He's the perfect homemaker, cook, so considerate of her, just the perfect man, which is so weird. And his biggest problem is that he has dyslexia and he's really insecure about it, but that's his whole struggle in this book. As for April, I think over time she was actually a pretty awful character that, you know, demanded all these things from Marcus but wasn't really considerate back to him. For example, she was really worried that she would be fat shamed or something like that by Marcus, and doesn't think it's right to just really fixate on a person's body, but she does do that to him and objectifies him pretty often throughout the book. And anytime he doesn't do something perfect or right, she gets really upset and really bothered but doesn't outright talk about it. I did notice that this was a common critique when I also looked at other people's lower reviews where they're like, this just doesn't work. Like, I don't feel like I'm rooting for either character. I felt like they were just making more problems where there weren't really any problems there. I think April's journey with her body was actually really beautiful and very real in what she talked about, and really empowering because she empowered herself to get to that point in the book where she just loves herself and she's okay. But overall, I just didn't really care much for this. It just felt like the conflict was pointless and unnecessary. It did feel more like a fan fiction and a little bit creepy that the author would daydream of actually secretly talking and writing fanfic to an actor from Game of Thrones who also hates the script, and then they end up meeting in real life and like falling in love. So it's just a little bit weird in that sense. It started off cuter, ended up being pointless. I didn't really care for it. Another friend told me that there's going to be more based off of other characters around them. I don't think I'm going to continue the series. I don't really care much for it. So I'm actually going to give this book 2 stars. The last book I want to talk about is called Something Wilder. Something Wilder was a pretty fun book, but at the same time also had some holes in it. Just also felt like, why are we here? Like, what's kind of the point? So Something Wilder focuses on Lily and Leo. Lily is this girl who absolutely loves horses. Leo is the city boy who fell in love with her, and that's kind of how the book starts when they're 19 and they're going to take care of this land together. Her dad is this treasure hunter. Like, he literally goes off into the real world and looks for treasure. He's an archaeologist. He's very well known, but that's not something she enjoys doing with him anymore. Fast forward, we end up 10 years later, I believe. So they're both 29. They're split up. Lily hates her job. She takes people on tours and does kind of like a scavenger hunt version of what her dad used to do, and it's nothing really real. There's this lore in there of this really famous criminal who left money somewhere, and there's a rumor that the Duke, her dad, was looking for this money as well, but no one has found it. Nowadays, I think that money would be worth, they said something like $5 million or $50 million, just like a huge sum. But again, no one really believes this thing is actually out there. At least Lily for sure doesn't believe this is out there. His life back home is very different in the city. He's very well off, he's wealthy, and every year they have a guys trip, so they do things all around the world and everyone takes turns planning this trip. His friend Bradley ended up planning this year's trip, and it actually ended up being an expedition with Lily's company. So they're put in this awkward situation where they see each other again for the first time after 10 years, after Leo just left saying there was a family emergency, never called her back, never really broke up with her, just disappeared and left her. She never knew what happened to him, and now she has to take care of this guide. This story quickly goes south when the freaking annoying guy Terry, he's like the epitome of mansplaining and just being such a jerk and dumb, right? But he thinks he's a hot shot in it or whatever. Ends up stealing Lily's journal, which is actually the Duke's journal with all of his writing and all of his hints and everything like that. he steals it, and Lily is trying to get it back, and Terry pulls out a gun on them, and he's like, I'm gonna take this, and he tries to take Lily's best friend and business partner Nicole with him. Bradley and all of them get into a fight with him, and Bradley ends up pushing Terry off of a cliff, and he ends up dying. And so this story goes from like, oh no, like we're accidentally back together, and there's this like tension between us and unspoken past, to a freaking murder. So we have this murder, and what do they think of doing instead? This guy Bradley pulls the gun back on them because Nicole clearly saw him push Terry off, and he's like, well, you guys aren't gonna turn me in, just let me go, or whatever. And it just turns into this mess and this really awkward situation. They don't know why Terry would possibly steal Lily's journal, and when they go through his stuff, they realize that he literally thinks he can find that hidden treasure from that criminal, and that Duke has the remaining clues they need to find this treasure. And Lily does speak up that there are so many fans that keep asking for that journal, that are asking where he could have possibly hidden this money, that the Duke probably knows, but she never encountered a fan in her group like infiltrate one of her groups to try to steal something and go look for this money. And when they also keep looking through his bag, they notice that he had handcuff like zip ties and all this other stuff. So he clearly came with a plan to abduct them and keep them. And so this is where, to me, the story started to get kind of silly, because this guy was just murdered, and instead they decide to cover it up, and they said, you know what, let's just keep going. And so from one scene they're freaking out to the next, they are very calm. They decide to make a plan, and they decide to go find the money because it's actually possible and it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. And of course things go wrong along the way. The other character, who's really nice, breaks his ankle, and so they can't keep going. Nicole decides to stay, and Bradley is right away being a super weird character. Like, they don't understand why he invited Terry in the first place when he's not part of the group, and he's really annoying and he's just a terrible person. And then Bradley's like, well, I don't know, he just wanted to come. And then later on he changes his story, and he's like, well, Terry is actually the one who planned this. And they're like, why would you let him plan this? He's like, well, I just didn't have time. And then later on he confesses again that like, well, Terry was actually like, it's just, he keeps changing his story. He's super weird. He's insistent that he goes and finds the treasure with them, that he doesn't want Lily and Leo, who are the very, very obvious choice to go on this journey, since they're the most experienced, and Leo's really smart at figuring out clues, and Lily's so experienced in the wilderness. He doesn't want them to go. He wants to force himself to go with them. And so it's just super weird. And of course there's this chemistry between Leo and Lily, and they realize like they've always loved each other. And it turned out that Leo did try to call her and left messages with the Duke, and the Duke never told, you know, Lily any of these things. And so they reconciled, whatever. We have the love story, this treasure hunt in it and everything. Of course, Bradley ends up being a bad guy in all of this, and there's a tussle in there as well. Police show up at the end. They do find the treasure. I thought it would be more adventurous and more fun, but right away you had this murder that they're all just like okay with, and they never really talk about again. The part that was really sweet at the end of this book is where Lily realizes that Duke loved her this whole time, because she didn't really have a beautiful relationship with her father after her mother died, and she hated how he was always gone on these expeditions and these treasure hunts. And then she finally finds a letter from him when she finds the treasure, that he actually did find the criminal's treasure. And it's basically saying that he does love her, and that he's really sad that she doesn't want to adventure anymore after her mom died. And he wanted to give her one last adventure to remind her that she needs to go beyond this ranch and go explore and go have fun and see the world, and that he was really hoping they could do this together. And so he had died of a stroke a while back. I'm sorry I failed to mention that, but he had died of a stroke a while back, and so he was really hoping they would do this together. And that actually got me sentimental. I thought that was really sweet, a really good closure moment for Lily, where you could clearly see the Duke does care. It's just not the way Lily wanted or needed at the time, and the Duke kind of gives her closure for that. But again, I didn't agree with the rest of the sequence of events. It felt almost like it was trying to be like Pretty Little Liars. If you've never seen that show, it's just chaotic too. And again, that show's just super weird because why don't they just call the police and let them figure it out? And the police are so incompetent, which I guess can happen in a lot of places, but it's just kind of ridiculous. But I did enjoy Something Wilder more because it wasn't very smutty. It was a little bit more suggestive and closed door than other books, and I was like, okay, like I can handle that. I ended up giving this 3 stars because it was sentimental. Those are all the books I read romance wise. So here's some books I really wanted to get into but I couldn't yet. Kiss Her Once for me. I really wanted to try that one. Once Upon a Broken Heart. I did not have time to squeeze that in between all these books that were being, delivered. A Simple Wild. Alone with You in the Ether. I really wanted to try this book because it's a darker form of romance and this could be a different type of romance that I haven't tried. Love and Other Words. That was recommended to me so many times. And Icebreaker. I heard that was really funny, even though I've heard it's very, very spicy. Those are some books I really, really wanted to try, but I wasn't able to try them because I wasn't able to get a hold of them in the library. But I'm still putting them on hold because after reading all these books, I realized I do enjoy the romance genre quite a bit. My 2 favorite were Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and Red, White, and Royal Blue. I really liked the characters, the funniness, and honestly, I do have to admit, it was a nice break in between my darker books. The funny, the lighthearted, the sweetness of romance was a really nice break. I definitely discovered some characters I am not a huge fan of. Definitely realized that I'm not a huge smut life person. I just don't really care to read chapters and chapters of these things, and that's just me. But I want to thank you all for recommending the books that you recommended. I'm really happy I did get to find some romance novels that I did like. All those books that I put on hold, I still have on hold because I want to try them. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like and comment or give me any other suggestions you have on any genre or book you want me to read. That way I can bring you even more content. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!